If you didn't know, Bolo the producer just set the streets on fire with his Pro Tools take, and I reached out to him before making this video, so this is no beef. I just wanted to comment on his take, and then there were other takes and a whole like loophole of takes about, is Pro Tools the industry standard? So instead of me taking like a technical yes it is or no it isn't, I'm gonna just give you my viewpoint as a music producer who's been doing this for years. You know, we've taught over 1 million producers around the world. So I'm going to work with Drake, Kanye West, Post Malone, Ariana Grande, French Montana, Young Thug, Polo G, Trippie Redd, Lil Baby, J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar, a really long list of folks. And we all use FL Studio for the most part. But does that mean that FL Studio is the industry standard? Let me just start with that question. If Pro Tools isn't the industry standard, according to Bolo in this case, is FL Studio the industry standard? And I would say, what do we consider the industry? Again, I'm trying to stay away from the yes or no, like is it technically right or technically wrong? That's not what I'm doing in this video. I just want to give my perspective as an FL Studio user. So I would say as an FL user, it's the standard as far as music production, but standard is kind of a weird term. It's pretty much the DAW that everybody loves to create in. In my kind of words, FL Studio is the greatest canvas for music production. It's not the greatest mixing tool. It's not the greatest. It doesn't have the greatest sounds. They're working on sounds now, but it took them a long time to do that. And shout out to them, no critique. But it's just a great canvas. It has the greatest workflow, in my opinion, for music producers. That's why I have a free FL Studio course, busyworksbeats.com/premium. It's completely free. Go to my FL Studio course. Actually, go to busyworksbeats.com/FL Studio, because that's where my free stuff is. But long story shorter is, I can't say that it's an industry standard just because millions of producers use it around the world does not really make it a standard, because that's just the creative composition side. I could compose in Cubase, I can compose in a tracker software, I can compose in Reason Studios. I just saw Blast make a crazy beat. Shout out to Blast. Holy crap. I didn't know he produced. I thought he was just an artist. Forgive me on that. I was ignorant. I saw something on Twitter where Blast was making a beat on Reason. He had me about to subscribe to Reason to get that one bass that he had, because that thing sounded monstrous. But Reason, it might be good for sound design and learning signal flow. I really learned a lot with the, spin the unit around, see the back of the rack, and learn signal flow. It's a great teacher for signal flow. But for most people, we didn't come up in a studio, so it's like a foreign concept to have a console and a channel strip and like rack units. That's a foreign concept to somebody first getting into music production, because it costs a lot of money to even know what a rack is. I have a rack to my left, and I have a well, not really a channel strip, but I have like a little unit here, audio interfaces and stuff. So I kind of comprehend the hardware stuff, but it took me years and years and years to comprehend. So I think that's why a lot of people can't resonate with Reason, for example. But going back to FL Studio, it's the greatest canvas. They were kind of the weird ones who experimented with, workflows that weren't typical, like having the mixer on a different window and having it to where you can't see the wires in the mixer, and having it to where like the playlist is more modular. You can move automation around, whereas every other DAW had like a track, straight line across type of workflow. FL was like, okay, what if you want to drag this and put it over here? So it was more of like a building block, very creative, but very experimentative with their approach to being a DAW. But does that make it the standard? Like if I go inside, what does standard mean? It's kind of like the equivalent to, yeah, you make beats, but do you have placements? And my thing is like, I could care less about placements. I'd rather work with billion and trillion dollar brands. I could care less about the artist who isn't worth 1/10 of that. But that's just my perspective. But to somebody who's like, okay, I'm worried about if you work with Big Sean, Lil Wayne, all their idols, Kanye West, did you work with Mobb Deep? Did you work with all these like idols of people, because they worship celebrities and they want to get closer to the celebrity? It's like going closer to the sun, to worship the sun. A lot of people want to do that, surprisingly, in music. So when they ask about placements, for example, that's their only mindset with placements. It's like, is that all you think of, is like which artist to work with? There's billion-dollar brands ready to pay you guys a lot of money. There's trillion-dollar brands like NVIDIA. I can't wait to reach out to NVIDIA soon for a sponsorship. And I'm going to pitch them on an idea for you guys. But long story short is, think about the different ways we go about music. How do we define industry standard? Okay, let's go back to that question. Because if I say industry standard is, okay, it must be used by TV stations, I don't see them using FL Studio. Is it used by professional music studios where they record per hour and they charge people for that? I don't see them using FL Studio as a default program to record. Are we talking about a system used for live shows to run live audio and run live things and do DJ sets? I don't see people using FL Studio. So at that standard, it's like, what do we consider a standard? Do we mean something that everybody can go to and rely on that? In that case, I can't say FL because FL has crashed many a times for unknown reasons. And FL Studio is just not, it's so creative, it's not one thing. And that's a good and a bad thing. But if I wanted the one thing, if I'm going on tour, which I would never do, but I'm just saying, if I was a DJ and I was going on tour, I might think Serato. I might think Ableton because I could perform live and have consistency and stability. Ableton. Okay, that's why a lot of EDM producers use Ableton. It's not just because you can make beats in it. It's because of their audio manipulation tools, and they could do live sets inside of Ableton using the clip functions and everything else. Whereas, am I going to do a live set from Pro Tools? No. It might be the industry standard for recording. However, like if I go to a music studio and I go to a professional studio where you're paying $80 an hour, $100 an hour, like they're going to use stuff that's just run in the mill. You will sound like everybody else. You can get a consistent result. That's Pro Tools. Like if I went to a photography studio and they use like some weird experimental cameras, like, what's that thing called? A Kodak camera. And they use these like weird digital cameras to take pictures. That might be a boutique thing, but for the family who's just trying to get family photos, for the person who's trying to do portfolio shots, for the person who's trying to do like creative, I don't even know what they call it, creative shoots. They're going to go with something that's run in the mill. The same way when we record, we're not going to use the experiment of microphone, like use a microphone from a submarine of 1920. It might have a nice tone. It might sound good. But if we want the run in the mill podcast mic, Shure SM7B. Like it's just consistent. Everybody can rely on it. We're probably going to get the same consistent results. We don't have to worry about it too much. This is the industry standard because everybody can use it. Can everybody use FL Studio? No, not in all cases. Not for recording, not for live TV, not for live sets. Maybe for music production, yes. Can everybody use Ableton Live? Not for TV. Yes for live sets, yes for recording. But I wouldn't say that it has the greatest tools for mixing and doing all that. But that's debatable. Logic Pro. Is that industry standard? Most Macs come with Logic Pro. So if your studio is Mac based, you pay extra $200, you have it for life. So I could see where, and it sounds very, very good. They're mixing plugins. There's something about a Mac and Logic. It's like a glove. They just know the audio and they're best friends, and it just sounds amazing. It's like the audio sounds analog. It's very hard to explain unless you're on a Mac, but it's just impeccable sound and very clean. So I could see where that would be an industry standard because the person who does podcasts can open up Logic Pro on their computer. Logic Pro's on the checkout of every MacBook and every Mac Mini and every Mac Studio. It's on the checkout. Why they don't have FL Studio on the checkout of Mac computers? And what I'm saying is that it goes beyond the music producer. It goes beyond the video editor. It goes beyond the mixing engineer. It's about people who do podcasts, TV. What else? Edit for radio, which is basically TV and media. It's all these use cases. I think that's what industry standard means, is what can be used across all of the sectors. In that case, I would say Logic Pro and Pro Tools. Now, does Pro Tools come with Mac? No. Does Logic Pro even come with Mac? No. But it's right there on the checkout. So here's my final philosophy is that in the Mac world, Logic is the industry standard because it's sold to everybody who buys a Mac product. In the PC and Mac world, you have Pro Tools, which is that professional, can work on a TV station. You got to buy HD rigs that are just thousands of dollars. It goes into the really tech hardcore hardware world where you have to really know your stuff about converters and science and audio and signal flow. It goes into levels where it's almost so geeky that, the average person would have to study for years to learn that stuff. Like Waves. Most people don't know why Waves is important. They think it's because you can mix your vocals. That's only one part of Waves. A lot of people don't know that Waves plugins are used on live performances. Like if you go to, follow a lot of people on Instagram when they're doing their like live rack and everything, they have like Waves racks where, and I might be wrong about the exact brand here of rack unit, but they have a rack unit and then they run Waves plugins on the rack unit. Okay, so they're controlling the mic live with Waves plugins. They're controlling, the audio of the crowd with Waves plugins. It's very consistent for live performances, like stadium live. I'm not talking about like your local bar live. Okay. So there's, but do we see Waves at TV stations? I don't know. Mainly because you have to install it as a third party. It doesn't come stock. So I think the closer something gets to being with the computer, the closer it is to being an industry standard because it's distributed to everybody. So that's my final kind of perspective about it. Is it distributed to a lot of people? Can every sector rely on it? I think those are the two categories we have to consider for industry standard. And last, I would say, is quality. So can you get a consistent quality out of Pro Tools? Yes. Can you get a consistency quality out of Logic? Yes. Can you get a consistent quality out of FL? No. You really have to know how to work FL to be consistently quality with it. But that's what makes it great for music creatives. We have to be creative with it. So that's my take on Pro Tools, and shout out to Bolo because he stirred up a whole beehive about this. I think a lot of people are just I think Bolo tapped into something that was deeper than the actual DAW. I think Bolo tapped into like the transition from old school studio to new school studio. That's really the conversation. It's like old school studio. I'm just saying old school to be vague, but like traditional studio, we'll say, to modern studio. I think that's really the conversation at hand. And to continue this thought, even beyond Pro Tools, if it's industry standard, FL has done a lot. Let's just look at FL for a second, because, I've trained so many people around the world on FL Studio. But the problem that I see, and I'm not trying to make this negativity, okay, I'm just saying this, is the problem that I see with FL is that how do I explain this without coming off? Okay, so firstly, the developers, we love y'all. To everybody on the FL Studio team, we love y'all. It's no disrespect. I'm saying this as far as a user who's been on this for years. So if you're dominant for years and years and years and years, it's kind of like the Apple problem where people had the iPhone 14 or iPhone 12, then iPhone 13 came out, then iPhone 14 came out, then 15 came out, 16 came out, 17 came out, probably. I don't know what version they're on now. 15, I think. And it's like nobody had a reason to upgrade the iPhone because it was so good at 12. It's like, what else can you really add to the iPhone to make this a better iPhone? And I think that's what happened with FL. It's like it became so good of a workflow that they kept developing workflow stuff. And I do respect them because Logic Pro is coming for their lunch big time. When I found out that Logic Pro had a sequencer, like a drum sequencer, the same way we have a channel rack, and it had hi-hat rolls built into the channel rack and all these like microscopic things built into their channel rack, I was like, this is better than FL. And probably months later or a year later, FL came out with the note repeat in their channel rack because they realized that Logic Pro was about to take their market share if they kept slacking on the workflow. But I'm not here to critique FL. I'm just saying they keep iterating over workflow, but there's less innovation as far as music technology in general. As EA Ski might say, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he always talks about converters and quality of sound. Like, why does the MPC of then sound better than the MPC of now? For the most part, I'm generalizing. And why do Yamaha keyboards sound way better than, from the 80s, sound better than I won't even say Moog. Let's take it off of Moog. Some Behringer company. I'll just say Behringer because everybody just disrespects Behringer. But, I'm just saying Behringer. But why does, an old keyboard in the 1980s have more resonance in the sound than the keyboards we get today from whatever brand? It could literally be whatever brand. I'm not trying to bully Behringer or anything, or Moog or anything. But I've noticed, like I've went to a Synth Palace and they had stuff in Canada, Montreal, Canada, that you couldn't even buy it online. Like the OBX was there. The freaking, what was that thing we used? The Chroma, okay? From Rhodes. It was a Rhodes Chroma at the time. This thing sounded monstrous. Now there are remakes online from UVI, and there's it's the Cherry Audio made a remake, but it didn't feel like the real thing. Because I heard the real thing in real life. It sounds like nothing I've ever heard before. It's my favorite synth next to the PPG synth. That's a blue synth with the wavetables or whatever. And the Mini Moog was also dope too. But I'm saying there were synths there you couldn't even buy online. So what happened to the technology of that time to where it didn't translate to modern technology? Like Korg Kronos has some of the greatest sounds I've ever heard. It's just the greatest piano keyboard workstation I've ever owned. I have the Yamaha motifs, I have all that stuff, but this one is the greatest one I've ever owned. Supreme sound, like so far different than a plugin. I'm like, why would you ever buy plugins? It's just such a supreme sound. It's like you're never gonna get this sound in a plugin. Because it will be like 3,000 gigabytes. It would just be too big, in my opinion. Now, Roland Cloud came out with a super competitive product because that actually sounds like the keyboard sounds. It actually sounds like you have, $1,000 keyboard in your studio. And the question is, why didn't FL do that same thing? Like if Roland Cloud, and I understand they're working on partnerships. I'm not trying to like come at FL. I'm just saying, if you're the dominant industry standard, why don't we have a Roland-esque sound selection in the DAW? We would love to pay for that. I would. Even if I had to pay 500 more bucks for FL Studio just to get like a Roland level sound, why hasn't it gone there? And I think that's the conversation at hand as well. Is like, okay, industry standard, but what's the innovation? It's kind of like people's critique of Drake. You could be at the top of the game, and I love Drake. You could be at the top of the game, and they're like, okay, what's the innovation for the next level? Like what separates tech companies like Nvidia, Apple, Microsoft, OpenAI, and all those? They innovate for the next thing. A lot of companies just became big, but they never kept iterating to find that innovation to keep the drive alive. It's kind of like the Steve Jobs effect. When Steve Jobs was at Apple, they innovated. And then when he passed, unfortunately, the innovation kind of stopped and it became more of a stable, predictive kind of flow. Yeah, they make a lot of money, but it's not as innovative as it was before. It wasn't as cutting edge, I would say. And I'm giving my opinion based on my perspective. So I'm saying all this to wrap it up, my perspective up in a nice bow, is to say, I think to claim industry standard, you have to, one, have innovation as well, because that is what the money is for. Like if somebody pulls out their hard-earned dollars to give to any company, they expect the company to grow, to invest in R&D, to move to the next thing. We're investing in the future of that company. Whenever you guys buy, like audio software, you assume that the company's going to be alive in the future to give you customer support. That's kind of why you're giving them money. So in the future, their company could stay alive and they could be there for the time when you actually need support or whatever the thing is. You hope a company doesn't crash and burn, because then you can't fix the error. You can't re-download the software. Everything kind of disappears. So it's like your money burned in thin air. So that's part of, in my opinion, people's expectations with these companies is to innovate, because innovation, pardon me, is going to bring that new life for the future to sustain the experience we had today. I know I had a lot of like points it seems all over, but it really was about the same exact thing. All right, guys, I'm gonna pick up my son downstairs, and much love to y'all. Subscribe if you're new. I want to hear you guys' take on Pro Tools. Peace out, guys.